Welcome to the Filtrum Radio. This is episode number 5.
Yes.
Tonight, a little different setting. Instead of music, we'll be talking politics with Ryan Costello, a local anti-war activist who works with Mass Peace Action and United Against War and Militarism. And I'm with my co-host, Andy Seepy.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. So maybe the first thing we could start with, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Mass Peace Action and United Against War and Militarism.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with United Against War and Militarism. We actually got started last fall, around this time of year in October, and we got started as the Coalition to Stop the Genocide in Yemen. A few of us were looking at what was going on in Yemen and really not seeing so much serious domestic opposition. I mean, there were some headlines after the killing of Khashoggi in Turkey, but that was one journalist, and it's a tragedy that he got killed, and especially so brutally. But there's tens of millions of people in Yemen who are...
Yeah.
There's a more systemic issue that maybe isn't as headline grabby, but...
Exactly. And we felt like we had to do something. And one of my friends is a student at BU, and he was saying that BU was hosting the UAE consulate and celebrating the UAE in the middle of this genocide that's being carried out. Now, a lot of the coverage focused on the Saudis, but the UAE is right there with them doing all this stuff.
So this conference was a celebration of the United Arab Emirates, or was it like was it some sort of like diplomatic thing? Was it like so it was a college function?
It was a BU college function celebrating what would have been the 100th birthday of the late Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the UAE.
I see.
So, it's run as basically a monarchy with a series of kind of monarchs who work together. And the BU is celebrating this. The UAE fairly openly runs based on slaves, actually slave labor. And this was a
I didn't
function.
know that.
Yeah. So most of the people in the UAE who actually do the work are foreign, quote, guest workers who often have their passports revoked, aren't allowed to leave, and have to work in some of the most inhumane conditions possible.
And they're hosting this right at BU, which is like right up the street from here. And
they do use a lot of Yemeni workers. If I'm not mistaken, a lot of countries in the UAE, they kind of treat the Yemenis like third-class citizens, and a lot of kind of domestic labor in a lot of those countries is done by Yemenis, if I'm not mistaken.
The Yemen's history is one of kind of exploiting their economy and exploiting their labor, isn't it?
Yeah.
By the Saudis particularly.
Yeah, and maybe it was 20 years ago or so, the Saudis expelled 1 million Yemeni guest workers over conflict with Yemen. But these situations as domestic laborers, it's very dangerous, especially for women, because you have no power, you have no rights. Your passport is often held by your nominal employer, and you're not allowed to leave, actually, even if you want to. And they control your whole life.
Jesus.
And, it's not just people from Yemen, it's people from India, from Bangladesh, from the Philippines, from Pakistan in particular, and people who are so poor, and they're often tricked into going to these countries on the promise of work, not realizing what they're getting into. And then there's fairly open slave auctions, actually, that happened in Dubai and in Riyadh, where wealthy people come and buy servants, effectively slaves, And so anyways, all this was going on, and we felt like we had to do something, a few friends and I. And so it started with 5 of us on a very cold and rainy day, almost probably on the verge of snowing, probably 40 degrees maybe outside, protesting for maybe an hour outside of this one Silver Way at BU where this event was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got started.
And when was that?
That was last October
Last
2018.
October.
Yeah.
2018.
And
so it's been about a year.
Yeah.
Keeping strong.
Yeah. And so, we met up with folks at MAPA. I got involved with them. Now I'm also a member of MAPA and Mass Peace Action. And we started working closely with them on a whole bunch of other efforts. In particular, on this, we started this Raytheon Anti-War Coalition, looking in particular at the Massachusetts-based weapons manufacturer Raytheon as a local connection to this broader problem of war and militarism in our society and imperialism. And I guess last spring, those of us in the Coalition to Stop the Genocide in Yemen realized that the scope of our work had expanded beyond just Yemen. And we're still doing a lot around Yemen, but we're also doing stuff about Afghanistan. We're also doing stuff to try to stop potential war with Iran. We're also talking about broader nuclear buildup for World War III. And so we decided, given that our work had expanded, we had to rename. And so we reconstituted ourselves as United Against War and Militarism. And
Interesting.
we do a lot of different anti-war work in the area.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, that the war with Iran thing is like, oh, man, it's so foolish. Like, there was this. Actually, the other day I was back home. I'm from Rhode Island, and my grandfather was there, and he was making some dinner. And my grandpa's a nice guy, but he had Fox News playing in the background, and they were obviously encouraging like an escalation of Iran. And fortunately, I just asked him, "Do you think we turn that off? Let's just talk." And he shut it off. There's no argument. There's no why, but it was just, let's shut it off.
Yeah, maybe you could tell Ryan that story about you and Leon watching the TV. That you were.
God.
This is an interesting story because